Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pencil versus Pixel. My name is Caesar, and I have the pleasure of being joined today by Dan Provost and Tom Gerhardt of Studio Neat. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Tom and Dan of Studio Neat created products like the Glif, the Cosmonaut, the Frameographer, Slow, Fast, Slow, and the book titled It Will Be Exhilarating. We'll get more into the products they created and about their company in a bit, but before we continue, guys, pencil or pixel? Anyone?
Good question.
Dan, you go first.
I suppose I should probably choose pixel. I should probably choose pencil. I have a blog that's titled "The Russians Used a Pencil," so I feel like I'm kind of forced to choose that one. So I'll go with that.
Nice.
That's true. I would go with pencil too. I've actually realized lately that I think much better if I'm like huddled over a piece of paper, just like doodling or something. So, yeah, definitely. If I didn't choose one, I'd probably do pencil. I'm gonna say pencil.
You're saying pencil?
I am.
Usually someone says pixel, the other person says pix, or vice versa, you know? And it's funny because, you know, one person will say one thing and then the other person will say, well, I guess since you said pencil, I'll say pixel, you know? So that's good. You stuck to it, man.
We are the same.
So, guys, today we're going to talk about products and what you've learned while making them. But first, tell us a little bit more about yourselves and well, what's your story? What's your story and what's the story behind Studio Neat?
Well, Dan and I are both outlaws. We rob banks, and this company is a front for. No, I
finally get the truth out. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we've been friends for a long time. I'll just kind of do both of our bios, unless Dan.
Sounds good.
We both actually grew up in Texas and started out at Texas A&M University in the environmental design program. Which kind of gave us like a broad, it's kind of like architecture program in some ways. I was in the architecture track, and Dan was in the like visual studies, media studies track. It's kind of like a basic undergrad design kind of program. And we both graduated and moved up to New York together in a U-Haul, in fact.
No way.
With my girlfriend and now wife.
Awesome.
And we went to master's programs in New York. I was at NYU ITP, which is like a design technology program, and Dan was at the Parsons design technology program, which is pretty similar. And then, we graduated and got jobs, and we're working at those jobs for a couple of years. I was at Potion Design, which is like a small interaction design firm in the city, and Dan was at Frog Design, which is big and everyone knows. And we were friends. We were living in the same apartment building, weirdly. We kind of had worked on stuff a little bit together in the past, but not really. But we figured we should because we were so close and we were good friends. And then, we were just kind of waiting for an idea to happen. And then the iPhone 4 came out. Dan got it, as he always does. And he's always taken a lot of video and photos and stuff, and he was like, man, this camera is like really awesome, but I just like want to stick it on a tripod because like all the photos and videos like suck that come out of it because it's like shaky and blah blah blah. So so we're like, okay, well, what would that be like? And we just started working on it and sketching and just being really casual about the whole thing. And then we arrived at something that we thought would kind of work, and so I kind of modeled it in the computer. We 3D printed it. We did iterations of that. Arrived at kind of like, wow, this thing is pretty awesome. It works. It's like cool. We're like, okay, we want to share this with people. We want to like give it to people. We didn't really have a way to do that. And so Kickstarter had just kind of started, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it's been around for like 8 months or something, and Dan had backed a project, and I was kind of familiar with it. And so we're like, well, maybe we could just put this up on Kickstarter and see if we can raise like $10,000 because we knew that's kind of what it would be to be like real.
Right.
So we put it up there like kind of with nothing, no intention or not really much of an intention and no expectations. And in the first day we like tripled our goal and it blew up and we're just like, oh crap, like what's going on? And then that was over 3 years ago. And so now we have a company, and we're just kind of continuing to make stuff. And we obviously have quit our jobs, and now this is our job.
Yeah. So I mean, now you came up with this idea of a tripod mount for the iPhone. Did you always want to make you always wanted to make stuff? Did you have that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the both of us are definitely kind of have that mindset, and all through our childhoods, and then our schooling, it's a very creative focused and very much like making things. And I think in different ways, kind of coming up through school and stuff, we've found ways to make physical things, even if we were kind of forcing it into the program. So like, I would be, making videos and stuff, but I would find a reason to like make, a cool like jewel case for the thing. Like there's always.
And your movies always had like physical stop motion stuff in them too, like a lot of time.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Nice.
I think the whole we like to make things has just been part of us and part of our approach to design and just what we enjoy doing. And so this product specifically, the first thing we did, the Glif, just kind of came naturally. Like we like to make things. It was a good idea. It seemed like something we could work on together. So it kind of happened very naturally.
How long did it take for you guys to sort of come up with the prototypes? I mean, I'm sure it took tons and tons of different, versions, different iterations. But was it very, very time consuming? Was it something you did on your off time?
Yeah, I mean, because the Glif is like a perfect starter product like thing for us because it's so simple in a way. And the cool thing was because we kind of had the skills and all of this like digital fabrication stuff was just becoming like easy and accessible. I think we probably had like a 3D printed prototype like, I don't know, Dan, like week or two.
Wow.
Pretty early. And then, we probably went through like 10 to 15 iterations of like getting stuff printed and like tons of sketching. But I don't know. I can't remember exactly how long the whole process took, Dan. But like 2 months at the most, a month probably, like to really.
Yeah, a little longer than a month, but yeah, it was fast, and that was kind of an interesting part of the story of how quickly we had a physical thing in our hands. Like I had never 3D printed anything before. I think Tom had in the past for other projects, so that was a crazy thing to me. It's just like, whoa, we thought of this idea and now we like have it in our hands like 2 weeks later or whatever. So that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's like what enabled us to do it, basically.
That's amazing. So you had this prototype and you said, okay, here's this Kickstarter thing. Let's give it a try. Let's see what happens, right? And to your surprise, it just it blew everything and everyone away. Like you clearly surpassed your goal. Now, let's talk about the manufacturing part. So you and congratulations on that, by the way, on all your products. But you passed your goal. So now you had this. You had to fulfill this idea. You had all these backers. Can you talk to us about the process of finding manufacturers and sort of what that took? So my guess is, you really had to just kind of let go of everything else and just focus on this and find out how you're going to make it happen, right? Talk to us a little bit more about that. How did that go about? How did you find manufacturers? Were there any challenges along the way when that happened?
Yeah. So Dan and I kept our full-time jobs for like 6 months. So
Wow.
The Glif, we had already like fulfilled the Glif and made it before we decided, and we'd started the Cosmonaut campaign, our second Kickstarter campaign, and then we decided to go full-time. So it was very much like, stepping out of my office and like, like my desk job and like calling manufacturers and stuff. Which, luckily I think both of our employers were pretty supportive of, which is pretty amazing. We're cool.
Awesome. That's awesome.
But, we got lucky for sure. So we went from ending campaign to completely filling all the Glyphs in less than 3 months, which is lightning fast. And that's just because we got really lucky. And it was very simple. So we got hooked up just early with a a manufacturer in South Dakota called Premier Source, and they like understood where we were coming from, that like we didn't know what we were doing. They needed to like help us and walk us through. And it just so happened that, the design we had worked for that. And so it was pretty simple. But we, before finding them, the way we approached it, as we do everything, is just like Googling it.
Yeah.
And like the only way we knew, right? So I think our attitude typically is we're not big, and so we don't work the same way most people work, so we just have to do like what we can. So it usually ends up like just Googling and cold calling people.
Wow.
But it's surprisingly, that like works out all the time. That's what we do now. So we have more resources, and we know more, and we know the lingo and how to do it, but it's still just a process of like, what can we do? Like, we want to get this done. What can we try? Right. So the Glif was really just a process of that, of just like reaching out to people, asking for help, and then just getting it. So we also had a lot of help from Patrick Buckley, who is, Dodo Case. They make like iPad cases and stuff that look like binded books, like moleskin kind of.
Yes.
He like reached out to us like right after the campaign blew up, and was just like, "Hey, I was in your guys' spot like a couple months ago. I learned some things. Let me tell them to you."
Wow.
So all of that stuff was a real big help in kind of standing on the shoulder of giants kind of situations. But so the Glif was like super easy, really. Now we know that it was super easy. It didn't seem like that when we were doing it, but now from more experience looking back, like it was smooth. It was a smooth delivery. Whereas now and in the past, like we sometimes just have like these what seem like insurmountable problems, which I'm sure in 10 years from now won't seem like big deals at all. But it's kind of just this process of like getting used to stuff and like learning the link. It's really a lot about like learning jargon and like what you should do or how the process works. Yeah, it probably didn't exactly answer your question, but.
So, Dan, you don't have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean that pretty much covers it. I mean, one note to add that I think is a little bit interesting is Premier Source, who we ended up going with to manufacture the Glif, and they've helped us with other projects since then. They reached out to us, so we did all the the Googling and found 4 or 5 places that we asked for quotes from. But Premier Source, I think I might be misremembering, but I think it was like a intern or something, or someone.
Their tech guy.
Their tech guy like saw the project and was like, "Hey, this is cool. These guys are looking for a manufacturer. Like, this is the type of work we do. Let's send them a message and see if we can help."
And I think the reason they knew that is because we said we need a manufacturer, right? Like, we're very open, like we always are with like what we need and what our challenges are. And so what's cool is the internet says, "Hey, we can help you with that," right? So I think that is a big part of it, is just being really honest about where you are and what you need, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and so since then, that hasn't been a unique scenario. Like, there's been a couple other times where we've kind of been needing something and someone has put us on the right path, or had a company that did that type of thing that we've actually gone with. It doesn't always work, and we certainly get a lot of solicitations that just aren't relevant or whatever, but it is kind of neat that sometimes it does work out that way.
Now, where would you post these? Where would you say we need this, or we need a manufacturer, we need something for this new product that we're coming out with?
Usually just somewhere in like a Kickstarter update. I mean, for the Glif, that was kind of the main story of it, is just like, we're making this thing and we need to have it manufactured. So that was pretty obvious, but there's been other situations like with this latest thing we're doing, the Neat Ice Kit, where there's like lots of parts and there's like lots of things that need to be coordinated. And so we get a lot of, people that are like, "Hey, I know someone that makes this thing, like maybe that'll help," and things like that.
I tell you, the power of the internet, right? I mean,
yeah, pretty good.
The law of reciprocation, right?
Yeah. No, I we hear that time and time again, is, talking about this stuff and like sharing as much as we can. Like, we wrote that little book for this very reason. Like, it always kind of comes back, and we, completely and utterly exist because of other people's advice that we've followed. So, why not?
Yeah, Tom, you talked a little bit about staying small just now. Do you guys have any plans to grow at any point, or do you? You've talked about this before, and I've seen your interviews and whatnot. But about staying small, just staying the two of you, and it's even outlined in your book. But have you ever thought of maybe, you know what, there might be a chance that we could sort of grow Studio Neat?
All the time. Often, like this whole week, I've been like doing like logistics, like literally like shipping imports and export stuff. So I'm like, why don't we have someone who does this, right?
Man.
So there's lots of stuff like that where
that Glif, then I'm just kidding.
yeah, right. So there's often times where Dan and I we were like, man, we know this could be done better. We know, it would be awesome to have a graphic designer on staff. Like we would love that, to have like a pro graphic designer on staff. We'd be like, this is awesome. We'd be better for it. But I think what we always come back to is we really want to be like forced into those positions, so that it feels more organic. So to answer your question directly, no, we don't have any plans to grow, right? But I think if it ended up being a situation where it was getting crappy for us to like do something and handle customer support or like design, or we ended up needing a lot of stuff, I think we wouldn't be opposed to it at all. But definitely we don't have the attitude where for us to be successful as a company or feel successful as designers or product makers, we need to be large or have a lot of people or have offices. Like Dan and I work from home. We just like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so that's basically it. We don't have like a trajectory, but I think if something felt really organic and we felt like we needed to do that, we would.
Do you guys do any planning ahead of time for new products or new ideas that you might have?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's. I feel like that's.
Or better yet, how far ahead of time do you plan? Do you plan things?
Not that far, actually. Maybe like 12 months at the most. It's yeah. So yeah, I feel like most of our discussion that's not, related to kind of what's already out there in our products is, the new stuff that we're thinking about working on. So yeah, we're kind of, I feel like we're always in a state of like, messaging each other, hey, what do you think of this? Like as an idea for something. And, we say no to tons of stuff. Like we have obviously like way more ideas than products. And, that's because I think we've gotten pretty good at kind of knowing, oh, this could be a product versus like, oh, this is kind of a neat idea, but it has some problems or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of how we work. And then we have, we have to make decisions, because it is just the two of us based on, what we're spending our time doing and what we think could be a successful product. And so we haven't really announced this. I think it's probably fine to say it here.
Yes.
Well, it's not an exciting announcement.
Oh, never mind.
But we've pretty much decided we're not going to do a Simple Bracket this year, which was our like March Madness app that we did last year. And that's basically just a result of, if we did it, these other things would suffer, like the Neat Ice Kit might get delayed, or there's like these other things that are kind of a higher priority. So that to me is a good example of like the kind of tough love decision that we have to make. Cause a lot of times it's like just not doing an idea that we had, but this was the first time it's like, oh, this is like a thing we already made that we have to like, not do this year. So that, that's kind of the result of just like having a lot of irons in the fire, I guess. But that's kind of how we roll. So yeah. I guess it is what it is.
Very cool. So you guys don't do planning any more than a year. And I mean, that's good. I mean, it's sort of the same philosophy as, and you guys also have mentioned these guys, but 37 Signals, right? I mean, they like Jason Frieden and his team talks about not planning way far ahead of time because things change so fast, and you might even change your mind like somewhere in between and think, okay, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, or it's not really working out. So
that's else comes out.
Yeah, it makes total sense, and that's awesome. Now, I'm a big fan of your website. I love the way it's laid out, the way it's designed, the way it's put together. Everything is so simple, and you focus on simplicity. Now, did you guys design it yourselves, or is it something that was a collaboration, or even the whole branding? Your branding itself is just, I mean, I love it. It's just to the point. It's not extravagant. You don't have like this crazy fancy logo thing going on. I love it. It's so clear. It's so concise. What was the design process behind that?
Well, slow. It's funny you should mention that. We're gonna like redo it all, except for the branding. but it's really to make it responsive and better. And
cool.
So the way like technically that all worked. So we kind of came up with like the wireframes of what we wanted and some kind of art direction. Then we had a friend, Caroline O, who's a designer, do the kind of like some of the layout stuff and some of the like picking type and colors and things. Just because Dan and I just like it takes a long time for us to do that stuff, and we don't do it as well as like hiring a designer. But basically, the way we typically approach that sort of like outsourcing of design is we will basically wireframe and do really intensive art direction and make like a packet and just like deliver it. And usually it only takes like 1 or 2 rounds of design to get done, just because we really know what we want. And the person can just kind of like take a couple guesses and like, oh, okay, that exactly. And we speak the same language, so like it's pretty easy. And like with the logo, we like someone else, we were thinking about a logo, and then someone else had like a very similar like mark, and we were like, man, that's almost exactly what we want. So we just like contacted him and like basically like licensed his design. It was very simple, but we wanted to be fair. So it's kind of this hodgepodge of like, Dan and I definitely know what we want and like have vision for things and can like self-critique. It could eventually get there probably with the design, but we love hiring designers or people that are experts at things because it's just so much faster and cleaner, and then they come up with something better than we could have. So it's kind of a messy process in some ways, but I think it feels pretty good for everyone because we just do a lot of like art direction up front. But in terms of like the evolution and the thinking behind the website and like our marketing, our branding and all that stuff, it is like really about simplicity, trying to be as straightforward and no gimmicks, none of that stuff. Like all of our prices are whole numbers. We enforce that across all of our products, even our resellers. Just that kind of stuff we just really value, and we think it matters. And so that's kind of where it all comes from. We really want to redo our website because it's not responsive. We're kind of outgrowing it just because there's going to be too much stuff. So it's becoming unsimple when it used to be simple. And so that's why we want to change it so it can get simple again, right? So it's kind of always the driving force when we do something is like, how can we oil our wheels better, basically, right? So we can stay small. So that's kind of our whole approach to everything is like, our goal, which I don't know if it'll happen, is to like spend the next 6 months like focusing internally so that we can get our wheels oiled and so that things can work better. Like we make inventory apps and stuff so we can track our inventory simpler. Just things like that make our life simpler, basically.
Sort of all the system things.
Yeah. And it's really, I think that stuff is like super, super important. I mean, the decisions we made early on and the advice we got about fulfillment and how to do our sales and all that stuff has enabled us to grow, but still stay like 2 people, but grow in revenue and stuff. So it's really critical, that stuff. Surprisingly.
So Tom, you said that you ship orders from your house, or do you? No, you don't.
Dan, take it away.
Okay. Yeah. So this was a bit of advice we got from Patrick Buckley that Tom had mentioned earlier. So we use a fulfillment service called Shipwire, and they're basically a company that fulfills orders. So we send them, a box of our inventory, and then they receive the orders from our online website, which is a Shopify website, and they have APIs that talk to each other, and so it's kind of a hands-off process. There's inventory management is still on us, make sure there's inventory in the warehouse, but they are fulfilling all the orders, so we don't have to worry about shipping from our garages or whatever. So that is a decision we made right off the bat, because we had all of these Kickstarter pre-orders for the Glyph. So it was like, we're not going to ship 5,000 orders like ourselves. That'll take months. So we need some help doing this. And then that ended up being, luckily, the right decision because we just kept using them and all new orders just kept coming through them.
Yeah, I still have that image in my mind where there's that picture you used to have on your website with the two of you sort of like just going away at, putting together the.
That was our lesson.
So
that was like we shipped out, like part of the initial Kickstarter, we had like 3D prints that you could order on one of the higher tiers, and we sent them out early. And after doing 500 of those, some international, we're just like, this does not work. Like, this is not how we're going to spend our time. So that was really the lesson, I think, that pushed us over the edge. Wow. Having someone else do the fulfillment.
Very cool. What advice do you have for someone who wants to create a product? Let's talk about a person who has an idea, maybe something sketched out, but doesn't know where to start, or maybe doesn't even have a partner. Maybe just one person that has this great idea, a possibly great idea, and would like to produce it. What would be your advice?
There's a bunch of stuff. I would say just like in the idea phase, making sure that you know what the context is that you want your stuff to be sold in, like who is it for, and like where would it be sold, and how much would it cost, and that kind of stuff. And then just make sure that it doesn't exist somewhere else, like that it actually really needs to be made.
Yeah.
Because and one of the things that I think we run into a lot is because we're small, the only way we're not going to be competing with like Samsung or something, right? So, at least for us, to where we think about where we fit in is like niche things or things that we can put a specific spin on, right? That isn't just like another cup or chair. So I think in the idea phase, really consider those things, like making sure that it is particularly unique, or you have some value proposition that would make it possible for you as an independent small person to do this sort of thing. And then, I don't know, Dan, do you have any other like more practical things?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, this point in history is pretty much the best time in the history of the world to be trying to do what you're trying to do, which is, bring an idea into the world. So if you do the first step that Tom said and validate that it actually is a good idea, then you should go for it. And there will be ways to solve, practically any of the problems that you have, whether it comes to like, 3D modeling or 3D printing or any of these manufacturing things. Like everything is just so keyed up these days to do those types of things.
And I would say, the cool thing is when we started, I think it was more rare that smaller people would be making stuff. And so when you would call up a manufacturer, it might really scratch their head talking to you. But now, I haven't changed too much, but definitely just call people. That was really the burst, like the bubble that needed to burst for at least me, and I think us, is like the way you do things is you find out who does them by Googling, basically, and then you just call them up. And you just ask them questions. You can say, hey, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I want to make a balloon holder, and I don't know how to do that. Like, is this the right process? You can send them a sketch or whatever. And these guys and women on the other side of the phone will, like, answer your questions. Like, they're professional engineers. They, own and run, like, manufacturing plants. And they will just straight up give you advice because they want to help you out, because they want you as a customer, and people are nice, right? So I think that's the biggest thing, is just there's a huge resource out there and other people on the internet and professional people, and you can just call them up and be honest, and they will answer your questions, believe it or not. So that's really the biggest thing, is like Dan just said, just like try it. Just try it.
Love it.
You don't have a lot to lose.
So guys, are you going to continue using Kickstarter for an upcoming product or for future projects?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we are happy to use Kickstarter whenever it makes sense for us. So it's really just kind of like a gut feeling thing. We've released products on Kickstarter and not on Kickstarter, and we've released iPhone apps on Kickstarter and not on Kickstarter. So there's not really a rhyme or reason to it other than it like feels right and it makes sense in that context. And so, yeah, future products, if it makes sense, then we totally go back to Kickstarter. I mean, we've gone back 4 times already, so I don't know why we would stop now.
Yeah.
And they've all been like extremely successful, which is, I mean, that's awesome. That's really awesome to hear. You know, it's
crazy.
like I've heard of other stories, you know, with other people that have been putting things on Kickstarter, and you know, some have been successful, but for some reason, you know, when you hear their stories that, you know, afterwards, they're just like, oh man, I'm so glad that was over. I'm done, you know. But you guys, you know, really have a good groove. You just keep on going, and that's and it seems even generally speaking, like when we're talking like from an outsider's perspective, like it seems so good, like it seems so smooth. So like it's going really well for you guys, which is great, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to be sure, there are stressful moments, and the Cosmonaut campaign specifically was kind of our wake up call, where it's like, oh, things don't always go as smoothly as our Glif campaign did. So we can totally relate also to, you know, people that run campaigns and then are just like, I'm never doing this again, even if it was successful.
But it's definitely easier and easier to do, just because we have the back end stuff, like the fulfillment and stuff we know about, and we have each other, and you know, we just know how this stuff works better. So, you know, it's definitely going to get easier for us, I'm sure. Even though we're taking on more and more complex things, like we just made our 2 most complex products by far we've ever made. But I could totally. It is like stressful just managing the crowd and like talking to people, and like people are mean a lot of times, but then other people are nice, and so it's like always this, you know, dualistic thing. But it is rough. I mean, it's really rough. And if you get into it just thinking it's real casual, that's why we were lucky, because the Glif, we got into it pretty casually, and then we took it really serious, but it went smoothly. But I think a lot of people get into a much bigger scoped thing kind of casually, maybe. I don't know. Or they just think it will just work. I don't know. I could see that being a big wake-up call and just super crazy stressful.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extraordinary amount of work, and so you have to love it. Like you have to really, you know, be excited about the thing that you're making. Otherwise,
it's not the money, because you won't end up with a lot of money.
And that kind of goes back to like advice to, you know, aspiring product makers and stuff. Like you have to be super jazzed about your idea. Like if you're doing it just because the idea of making something sounds cool to you, like it's probably not going to work out. Like, you have to have enough enthusiasm to carry you through the rough times.
Yeah. Like Dan and I get real excited like 3 days. Like when we get to go to factories, when stuff is shipping, like there's like a couple days, and then the rest of it's like trudging basically. So
wow. Now you said people said some mean things. Like why would they say anything mean? I mean, what kind of examples?
Yeah, especially with like the Cosmonaut, for instance, it was the beginning our fault of not communicating correctly to our backers. So we had like delays in the Cosmonaut. That's what Dan's referring to. Like the kind of production delays. We thought it was going to deliver it we delivered like 6 or 9 months later or something, right? Which isn't too crazy. And we didn't take a long time. It just we set the expectations really high, or like that it would be done really fast. And then it was partially people not understanding what Kickstarter is and how it works, and partially us not communicating that correctly. So, but you know, you just end up, people can just be really critical or not understand the process, especially in Kickstarter. And so it can just feel really crappy. Like, yes, you may have 1,000 really nice things, but the 1 or 2 things just is like, oh, you know. And that's always going to happen, like no matter what. And so it's just something you got to learn to like run with and just like, you know, accept. But it can definitely, it's very personal, right? Like Kickstarter,
of course.
Running a Kickstarter campaign is like incredibly personal. And the more personal it is, the better it is usually, right? Like the more personal interaction you can make with your backers. But on the other hand, you know, it's really personal, right? So you take things really personally if people are just like spouting or being a troll on the internet, right? So it's, you know, not for the weary, right? You got to kind of be a little bit battle hardened, I think, on the internet, right? Or just know that exists and that will happen.
Yeah. So how do you kind of brush that off? For for a person that's not familiar with having to deal with that. A lot of and I generalize this all the time, but a lot of creatives sort of hold back or pull themselves back, or they don't want to really show a presence online because of these kind of things. Because people say nasty things, people do bad things, just for the sake of doing them, right? What would you suggest for that person to sort of, of course, be thick-skinned and whatnot, but how can they handle that? That's a tough question, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's
because you're talking about. I mean, like Tom, you said that these things are personal. Like I created this. How
for life?
How dare you talk about my creation like this? How can we better handle those situations?
Yeah, that's a good question, and hopefully this isn't like acting as a discouragement to like put things out there, because it's not. You do get used to it, and you realize that it's not people that are like. We never really got any negative comments about the product itself, like, oh, this is like a stupid idea or whatever. I mean, we got a few, but those are pretty easy to brush off. But the majority is just like, why haven't you delivered this, or why is it taking so long? And so you can kind of rationalize that, and it's just like they're excited about this thing and they want it, and they're sad they don't have it yet. So you can kind of spin it in your head of like, that's not even a negative comment. We're failing to meet their expectations because they're like excited to try this thing out, and they've spent their hard-earned money to get this thing. So yeah, it's not really horrible. Like you kind of learn pretty fast that that's just like the nature of vocal minorities on the internet that like to cause a stir. But
they're easily to rationalize away.
Yeah.
What was that, Tom?
Focusing on the like positive stuff is like really good. I mean, don't let the one person out of 100 like ruin your day, because there's always going to be that person. Like you can never, And so I think, take the criticism and really think about it, because often it might be right. But really, if you dwell on that, you're never going to get anywhere, right? And I think the other thing to do or to like say is, we as like part of like designers and creative people should praise people as much as we can, because it's just fighting against all of that like crap. Everyone, it's like the worst part of like place for this stuff is like iTunes like reviews and stuff.
Oh, tell me about it.
Basically, we shouldn't even read that crap, because it's usually people who are just spouting stuff off, or they don't understand or whatever. So I think it's really the flag we should be flying is for like all the creative people and designers to like support each other, because we need more of that instead of like the one or two like trolls, right, that are just senselessly mean.
Love it, man. Thank you. That's perfect. That's that's probably the best advice that we've heard here yet on the show.
Damn it.
So thank you guys. That's awesome.
Praise. Yes. Yes. But it's true. That's why like we were going to the XOXO conference a couple times, and like that's what's so awesome about that conference is a bunch of independent people who understand what it's like to make things and put them out in the world. Not just physical things, but just stuff. And they understand that we all need this like kumbaya of like, hey, it's okay. Like, I understand the problems you go through. So like, we end up talking about like fulfillment issues, like logistic stuff, or just like little things. But having like a community of people that know what it's like to just put stuff out there as an individual, is really important. And so I think, that's what's great about the internet. There's the trolls, but then there's the community of people who like support you, right? So interviews like this, and just like the more of this stuff that we can do, the better. It'll make it easier for everyone to do their work.
Definitely. There was another guest that I had here, and we were talking off camera, two guys that work on electronic music by the name of Isan. And off camera we were talking about like the sort of the delicate side of being an artist or being a creative person, and we kind of talked a little bit about the topic, and I was just asking them, why is it, they were talking about their friend that makes just phenomenal amazing music, And but he wouldn't put it out. And I said, well, why would he put it out? And he said, well, maybe because he doesn't want to be criticized. And I said, you know what, that's a big problem, I think, with creatives. You know, I have friends who are just amazing. I mean, just incredible artists, and they don't want to they don't want to do more with their art, for example. And you know, as a friend, I try to push them to, hey, you know, you should try to do this. I mean, anything could happen. But you know, it's a pretty delicate subject, you know, and you know, I really, you know, my hat's off to you guys, because you are making things and you're sort of just taking a risk at the very beginning. You're just thinking, you know, it might not work, maybe not, but we're gonna try it because we like this thing and because we believe in it, right?
I agree. I mean, it takes a lot of, it's almost like arrogance or something, but because it's like every time we think, we're like, well, we hope this works. Like literally, Dan and I, it's like, that's our joke kind of, where we're like, it's not a joke though, because we launch a Kickstarter, we're like, well, we hope this works. You know, like we don't know, like we never know. And so I think the thing we've really learned though, and I think this is true for everyone, is that if you are really into something and you really like this and you really like this product you've made or whatever it is, there's going to be enough people out there that feel the exact same way, and you just got to find them. And so that's really the lesson we've learned, and I think that's what enables us to just really trust our gut and be really almost selfish and self-centered in the design process, because we know there's enough people out there that are like us, right? And so we can just look internally to kind of source all that stuff and have some faith there. It's still like nerve-wracking, but I think that's the big lesson that we've kind of slowly been learning, is to have that confidence that there's others like you, basically.
Man, that's a knockout punch right there. Boom. Guys, so you know, we're about to wrap it up right now, but is there anything exciting that's coming up, anything that maybe we don't know about, any ideas, any new projects?
Well, let's see. I mean, we're really kind of excited right now about the Neat Ice Kit and kind of how things are progressing. And so hopefully, you know, within the next few months, that will be a product that exists that we can deliver to our backers. And so I guess as like a slight tease, I can say that like we have other plans for that space. Like we're not just going to make this one-off thing and then make something else randomly. Like we have some cool ideas for other things in the kind of cocktail space that can kind of supplement and complement the Neat Ice Kit. And so that's kind of where our heads are at right now.
Okay, so you're opening bars all across the country. Got it.
Exactly,
right.
yeah.
All right.
Come on down. Come on down.
Studio Neat Bar, or Studio Bar. Neat Bar?
Neat bar.
Guys, so before we wrap the show up, where can we find you? Let's start with Tom. Where can we find you? Online, in person? Any speaking gigs? I know you guys have done. You guys did XOXO a while back. And anything else coming up?
No.
We're going to Macworld.
Oh yeah.
Which is we do that every year to kind of on the expo show floor to hawk our goods to customers. So we'll be doing that again this year, which is end of March. Yeah.
So that's our. Come say bye. Come say hello in San Francisco. I think it's like free on Friday or something. You can just like come and we'll be there and we'll be happy to chat.
Nice.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't think we have anything coming up. But you can find me on, I guess, Twitter. It's just Tom Gerhardt, at Tom Gerhardt. And Dan, what about you?
Yeah, and I'm just at Dan Provost on Twitter.
Twitter. It is
Twitter.
And then there's at Studio Neat as well as like our company Twitter handle.
Very cool. And both of you are Studio Neat on Twitter, right? Both of you kind of handled that.
It's Dan mostly.
It's mostly just me. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He's the talker.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been very, very informative, and I mean, you guys are awesome, man. Congratulations on all of your projects, everything that all of your success. It's really inspiring to a lot of us out there in internet land who are trying to do the same thing or trying to make products or put our art out there. And it's very inspiring. Thanks so much. And And thank you all for joining us. You could find the links to everything we talked about here today on pencilversuspixel.com. That's pencilvspixel.com/Studio Neat. I'm Caesar, and I'm Pencil versus Pixel on Twitter. We'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, take care.